Like there's other things that we offer that's not just about the paycheck, right? So one of the definitely emerging trends is sharing with people in job descriptions, just as you're trying to attract talent. How do you take care of recognition? It doesn't have to be a tool, right? This is not just about having a tool, but do you have a core values award? Do you have a beyond outstanding award that you give to someone here? Share that in your job posting, share that publicly on social media as you're building your employer brand, right? So that's definitely one thing. And then another thing is showing and not telling, right? So when you have an interview with a candidate, maybe open up your photos of the last appreciation award you did, or open up your Slack and Microsoft Teams channel just for a little bit and say, hey, these are the examples of how we share kudos with each other every day or a week, just so people can see, oh, this is the culture, right? It's not just about what you tell people, but show them so they can experience, even for that brief hour that you're with them, about what is this culture actually? Not just what is this hiring manager telling me, but what do they actually do every single day? So those are a couple of things we've seen our customers do when they're competing for talent, which we of course know it's a pretty fierce competition out there.
Yeah. Some of the things I've been seeing in the comp world is, of course, more and more companies adding their pay ranges to their job postings. It's more of the norm now because of all the, this more and more states, of course, are implementing those pay transparency related laws, and even across the EU, that's going to be going live next year. The effective next year, the EU countries will need to, essentially, if an employee asks what their job level is or their pay ranges for their job, they need to be ready to share that. So a lot of rumblings of companies preparing for that, because it's not an overnight thing. They, for example, need to establish a good job architecture and, establish the good foundation for that by job leveling across the org. So that is actually another trend I'm seeing, is people job leveling across the org, even if they've done it before, because there's been a lot of restructure or maybe, new business like units added to, a sales org or something like that, right? Or a new leader coming on board. So they want to re-job level and establish career paths across the org, because that, of course, shares growth opportunities as well for employees that they want to know.
Well, I didn't know that about in Europe. I knew that about the States, but kind of makes sense. I know they're pretty strict over there with a lot of policies, not necessarily even related to work, but like privacy and security. So kind of makes sense that they're following along that path. I would say on my end, in terms of time off, what we're seeing a lot with our clients is just be more flexible. I think there's a lot of fads that are kind of coming and going, whether it's unlimited paid time off, 4-day work week, which I'm not downplaying those. I think those are also important, let's say, policies, but not every company can do that. Some companies do need to work the full 5 days, or they need people on staff, but just being more reasonable, I think, with requests. Like some companies are just merging sick and vacation days into one, like just take time off when you need it. Don't be worried about having it labeled correctly, or even, just giving their birthday off. It's like a small gesture. It's 1 day out of the year, but small things like this really add up. And again, it kind of blends into the notion a little bit on both your ends with the culture aspect, right? Showing and not telling. You put on the job listing that, hey, we give 5 weeks vacation or whatever, how many weeks vacation, goes a long way. Or whether or not you're even remote or hybrid, people appreciate that. And then it's the level of transparency. What do you, as a company, if you're trying to attract the talent, like be forthwith with all your information. They're going to find out eventually if you do hire them. So better to kind of get in front of that is always what I thought.
David, I'm curious on your front. There was a time, I don't know when exactly, when PTO, unlimited PTO was all the rage. Are you still seeing that be all the rage about just attracting people and having that as your policy, or people moving to more, as you said, flexible, constrained, a little bit more kind of guide rails around the PTO?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there was a period where it was definitely the hot topic. I think most people couldn't open their LinkedIn feeds without seeing something about it. Now, less so. I've seen it's not super widely spread, but what I do like is a limited PTO with a forced amount of PTO you do have to take. So like the idea is you have a minimum amount that you should be taking every year. I don't care that it's unlimited. You still have to take, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks a year to really encourage people. Because I'm sure, as everyone's seen, and to no surprise, when you put unlimited PTO, not a lot of people take it. They feel scared. They don't know how to kind of navigate this system. So they don't end up taking it, and then it hurts employee morale, and then it trickles down to just everything at the organization. So I'm seeing a little bit more of that, but I still feel like a lot of companies right now are still holding on to a little bit of like traditional kind of policies. They want to kind of see what everyone else is doing first before they dip their toes into something a bit more advanced.
Yeah, one of the things that we have been doing actually at Kamsa is, when you want to take PTO, just like put it in the PTO calendar. You don't need to, we trust you that you're going to take PTO responsibly. And that also helps force them to take PTO because they feel more comfortable. Because I know way back in the day, I'd be like, oh, I want to take off, but I don't want to ask my manager. So I'm just going to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's sometimes I don't know why people feel like it's an uncomfortable conversation when it really shouldn't be. At the end of the day, it's your paid time off. Like you're mandated to take this off. And for most companies, like they have to pay that out. So I think they'd rather you take the time off because it's kind of like a win-win. They don't have to worry about figuring out the payroll finances, and then you get the time off to recharge and relax.
One thing I think managers and fellow team members can do with people that they notice they're not taking time off is also just ask, hey, when's your next trip? When's the next time you're taking off? Especially if someone is new to the team and they don't necessarily know what the unspoken rules of when it's okay to take PTO, when it's not, encouraging them out and asking them, hey, what's your next fun staycation or vacation? When are you going to schedule something? Because in the beginning, everyone's kind of leery of tracking that PTO and saying, I'm out, right? Especially too soon after their start date until they understand what's the culture of the company.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we kind of touched upon these, but maybe we can try to give like one secret recipe or secret takeaway. Like the question I had written down was, how can we use like a lever here to stand out from competitors? Obviously, like there's so many job postings, when you're trying to hire for a role, and it's really hard to stand out, even given the policy that you do have, right? Sometimes you don't have the leeway to kind of bend things. So what would be, let's say, a secret weapon on your end that you think that would help people attract the best talent?
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind for me is a new kind of trend, if you will, that is popping up is like basically bonus programs. So let's say a company doesn't have a bonus program in place today and they're introducing it, and it's very much like a profit sharing model, right? So it's like a lot of companies are resource constrained, budget constrained right now. So it's like we only pay it out if we meet our revenue goals and we're profitable. From that income we distribute that as bonus, right? So then of course employees feel that ownership and and wanting to help the company grow and meet their revenue goals, etc.
Nice. I like that. Una, what about you in terms of recognition? Can you think of any secret tactics?
Secret tactics to stand out amongst myriads of people trying to hire? Sharing stories and examples in whatever channel you have available when you're recruiting. So it could be the job description, adding something that's unique and fun to you that people might read, right? Especially at the top of the page, the top of the job posting, or first thing when it comes to benefits, right? But something that stands out that a person says, this is different, right? This is not just about your regular benefits and compensation and pay range, which are all important, right? But it's kind of expected. Like I expect it to be there, but something fun, right? Maybe there's a photo you can share that says, hey, this is how we celebrated last year, this recognition practice. Or we have an offsite, and every offsite we do X, Y, Z, but adding a little bit more of that life. And then one trend I'm seeing as well is on your social profiles as a company, like LinkedIn, every candidate that really wants to work for your company will probably go check out your LinkedIn page and see how many employees, where you're located, all that stuff, right? Having celebrating people publicly on your LinkedIn or sharing these traditions that you have in place, the programs, the traditions, the habits, sharing them publicly. So when people are self-selecting what to apply for, they can see, oh, these people are different, right? They do something differently. And they can see photos, videos, live stuff that's actually tangible to them as to how recognition is part of that culture.
Yeah, on my list, whenever I switch roles, it goes LinkedIn 1 and then Glassdoor 2, trying to figure out a sense of the company, right? Like how does you interact with like the CEO or with like upper management? How do other employees interact? What's the workload like? Where's the work-life balance? So it doesn't surprise me that like that makes sense in my mind. I would say on my end, outside of the stuff we kind of spoke about in terms of flexibility and transparency, A big one, this is, I can kind of limit it, but if you do work remotely, is really championing that. At Vacation Tracker, we were fully remote. And one of the big things that drew me was because we're fully remote, they really championed the idea of like, hey, if you want to go work a month, from wherever, Peru, Greece, or, you want to take a month off, as long as you're still working and you're getting the work done, it doesn't bother us. And that's just a cool like thing that you can do. Obviously, if you're a remote first company, if you're hybrid, you can enact similar policies. Maybe they can choose the days they come in. I've heard of a few companies where they really mandate the days, and like I understand that to a certain extent. You want people on the same kind of wavelength at the same time, but sometimes there's stuff that comes up, or people have appointments that come up, so that flexibility can go a long way. And I'm seeing the chats fly off here. Una, anything interesting coming in?
Yeah, Steven was saying how having jobs on LinkedIn company profile is something that he always expects as a candidate, but a lot of companies don't do it necessarily. And I kind of agree with him. I think a lot of companies nowadays use, I forgot these, all the applicant tracking systems that can provide a landing page and just link it off of their website career pages. But LinkedIn is such an underutilized tool for distribution, right? You post a job and it can be visible to so many people, and you can see their profile right away, and they can see your company profile, right? It's so much more powerful than just someone landing on your jobs page on your website.
And honestly, a very reasonable cost as an employer. It'll cost you, but it's very reasonable. So
like everything these days, it's always pay to play.
Yeah. Related to the remote work, though, I've seen some of our clients, for example, they recruit from all over the world. So they're open to talent no matter where you are in the world. And even for, let's say, their US headquartered company and hiring in non-US countries, they'll offer very competitive salaries in those non-US countries where it's pretty much like slightly above the market there when you look at the local market data, but still below the US all national average. So they're aligning with the market, local market, but paying essentially a premium to get really good talent. So
like that. It makes sense, right? Taking advantage of exchange rates and like you said, areas of work. Why not? They're happy because they're getting above market salaries, and the companies, I'm sure, is very happy because they're saving on salaries as well.
Abigail, just to interrupt David for a second, Abigail said in the chat, she said, I find that people like having the ability to explore other job functions. So employees have enjoyed secondment opportunities as well. It's like when you post things on LinkedIn, people can find who their coworkers could be, and they can look at their profiles and see, wow, this person started as a support person and now they're an account executive and now they're doing something different, right? Sometimes investing in LinkedIn or any social profiles feels like, who cares, right? Well, that's not how we get our customers or whatever. But having this employer brand is not important until you need it, right? And the best time to build it is day by day, week by week, right? It kind of, you're building your profile, your brand online. So when people are looking for jobs, they're like, this is a legit company versus, oh, they don't have a heartbeat.
Yeah. On that note, I think it's time we maybe transition to, let's say, the second portion of our employee journey, which is engage, or in this case, how do you interact with the employees? You got them through the door, you used all our tactics that we just gave out now. You've attracted your top talent, but what's next? Because that's just the first step in this journey. And the first thing I want to see you is, okay, well, how do each of us, again, play a role when it comes to just keeping employees happy? I think Una maybe has an easier time explaining her component here, but for sure, again, we each play a role here, for sure. So maybe Una, you can start since you have.
I would love to. I definitely am ready to.
Yeah,
to go. This is
yours.
Hard. This is kind of where I think recognition shines. But as an employee, I do have thoughts, or what I felt on Lola's topic of compensation as well. So I'm excited to chime in there. But in terms of engaging employees with recognition, I would summarize it in 3 different ways. The first one is creating fun rituals around recognition, right? So it could be you have appreciations as an agenda item in your company meetings where people can go up and share an appreciation for something someone did or how they helped them the previous week or 2 weeks, whatever the distance was between your last all hands. Or again, HeyTaco, you can share, hey, these are some fun recognition messages that have been shared. Maybe you bring up a person to share the story behind them so everyone can kind of see what actually happened in case they missed it. Celebrating core values champions, celebrating people who gave the most recognition this week or this month or whatever, but creating these rituals that become the way your company lives gratitude, right? Regardless of the tool, regardless of what you do every day, it's rituals that have been known in human societies for millennia, right? Those are the rituals that kind of cement, hey, this is just how we roll as a team. The second thing is taking things outside of our asynchronous communication channels, Slack, Microsoft Teams, whatever, and bringing it into the meetings, bringing it into one-on-one conversations, bringing it into your offsite. So if you have an offsite, let's say once a year, how can you celebrate those people who are really sharing gratitude, or people who are really killing it in their roles, whatever that is, outside of the application? Maybe you have some swag you give people. Maybe there's like a little plaque. Like, it's not just about money and spending money on things, but taking it out of this kind of digital screen we all live in and giving something to people that is a token that lives on their desk. And every time they open up their computer, they're like, yeah, I earned this, right? Or like, I really felt appreciated by my company. And then the last thing is, sometimes people feel like recognition is to be owned by a functional area, in this case, a lot of like people leaders, right? HR, but engaging everyone to be part of at least providing input into how the program works or how the habit is built. For example, with HeyTaco, a lot of customers will have like taco councils that are cross-functional. And these people provide input and like, hey, these are some fun rituals, or this is how we can celebrate core values MVP this month, or this is how we should do what we should do with our rewards. But engaging everyone, because peer-to-peer works best when peers engage, right? And if you just put things on people, they're like, well, I don't want to do this just because Una in HR said so, right? It's like, I also have some ideas. So engaging people and asking for input and really hearing them and then adjusting accordingly. What better way to engage someone than to make them part of the solution? So those are kind of the three things that I've seen customers who thrive with recognition, the ones that are like, we just say thank you, it's part of our culture. That's what they do really, really well. That helps them engage the whole company.
Awesome. One of the things that I see companies underutilize that could engage employees more is looking more regularly for opportunities to promote within. So if you have a new open requisition, look internally first. Sometimes you can easily forget, you're like, open job, let's just post it. Let's like think internally first if there's any opportunities to promote. And then of course, like make sure your career paths are fleshed out. And as ideally, at least once a year, you're like refreshing it, aligned to the latest business needs. And, you're not going to just have 7 levels of administrative assistance because the business need doesn't call for that many levels of it, right? So you're aligning with the business needs still, but really defining it so you have opportunity to communicate to employees. Look, I know you're looking to get to be a senior marketing manager, right? To get there, here's what it looks like. Let's work on this together, right? So you're not just like ignoring them, and you're helping them to get to that next level, and thus engaging them, right?
Love that. Similarly to what you were saying, Una, in terms of time off playing a role in the engagement aspect, I think we kind of hinted at this a little bit, but for sure, not shying away about talking about your plans, encouraging people. Even let's say we were mentioning offsites at a previous company I was working at, wasn't vacation tracking, but they went out of their way when we did have an offsite that they would give a day off to employees. Or even if you have a Christmas party, like let's say at the end of the year, because it gets busy and it's on a Sunday, you give the Monday off, just giving extra time off, just the gratitude there. I've worked at companies where they've done, a mental health day. They saw the effects that it was taking a toll on us, and they wanted to give everyone just kind of a reprieve from the daily grind of the work. And they just spontaneously gave time off, which is always, again, appreciated. No one's going to say no to that, I don't think, unless you're an avid workaholic, in which case, good luck. But I think small decisions, being transparent, being open, communicating at all times, really, really goes a long way in keeping engagement. Here's an interesting thought I had as well. And again, I'm curious to see both your takes on it. But how do you check in with employees, right? Because most times when people are withdrawn, that they're not talking. So what are some of the methods you found that have worked to catch those red flags, to stop things in their tracks before they get too far?
Yeah, one of them, I actually did a LinkedIn post recently about, it's called nunchi. In Korean, it means like, it's hard to explain in one word, but it's like intuition and emotional intelligence
Okay.
and reading nonverbal cues all at the same
Yeah,
time. So
exactly.
on even a Zoom meeting with your team member, because you've worked with them a lot, these subtle cues of like, oh, they didn't really talk that much today, or, and so when that happens, instead of just ignoring it, like, is everything going okay? And
Yeah,
maybe like stop for a moment and not talk about work, even if it's not probing personal stuff, it's just like, everything okay? You want to move this meeting maybe to another day? And the other thing is, like, managers, it's okay to be like, look, I'm having a shitty day. Like, can we just like have this meeting tomorrow or something like that? So then just they can mirror you and say, it's okay for me sometimes to be like, I'm not in this mental space to have this meeting.
yeah, for sure.
One thing I've done in the past and had done to me is also, it's some regular cadence whenever you're kind of negotiating your results or goals for the next quarter or year or whatever, is have a conversation about intentionally opting into the job and intentionally opting into the person. So as a manager, say, hey, do you still want to work here? Like, just address the elephant in the room. Like, obviously not in that doubtful, not in tone necessarily. You don't want to do that, but it's like, hey, are you still getting value? Is there one thing that we can change at HeyTaco that would make your life infinitely better, right? Or what are you missing, or things like that? But just actually address the elephant in the room, because we are all choosing to do the jobs we do, right? And as employers, people are choosing to employ certain people. So it has to be mutual exchange of value, and just saying, hey, are we still having that exchange of value? And that always opens up room for, actually, this is not working. Maybe I'm not getting paid enough, right? Or maybe the work is not as interesting. Okay, let's figure out if there's roles within the company where you can take on different results or whatever, but actually just make it part of the regular kind of one-on-one conversation. So it never gets to the point where you're like, are you okay? Like, I think those are good as well, but could be even more proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, Laura. Go.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking, like, one question that comes to mind that, that I think would have been useful for managers to ask me way back in the day is like, what about your job do you hate doing? Like, what sucks for you right now, right? Because then it opens the door to be like, I freaking hate benefits. Can I just focus on
Yeah.
compensation? You know what I mean? But you just like, you think it's part of your job and you like suck it up, and so maybe you just ask them like, look, what motivates you? What do you love and thrive to do? It seems like this and that. Is that accurate? Like, what do you not like to do? Maybe we can take that off your plate and move it to a different team member and kind of switch, obviously not overload someone else because of it, but
Yeah, of course. Well, I was gonna say, when you were hinting at it, was make it more of a routine. Like, there's nothing worse than storing that up till the end of your reviews, or let's say if you do your reviews at the beginning of the year, and have it build up over the course of however many months, as opposed to just ripping off the Band-Aid, whether it's an impromptu one-on-one or something that's regularly scheduled. Because I've had that happen before, where someone knows that I was a bit off and they did it at my end of year review. I'm like, is this really the time you want to be doing this? Like, obviously it's like impacting my career path, my salary. I'm like, okay. So I was not a fan of that. So speaking from the employee side.
Yeah, the longer you wait, the more high stakes the conversation becomes, right? Whereas it could have been just every month we talk about this openly, but if you wait 6 months, now it feels like so much is at stake. So you're kind of, I don't know if I want to have it. Maybe we do it a performance review. It's kind of like giving feedback to someone, right? If you just do it in the moment or shortly after something happened, it's not that big of a deal. Or you just say, hey, can you just, do this a little bit more to the right? They're like, yeah, of course, no problem, usually. But if you wait 6 months, you're like, you remember 6 months ago? Now it becomes this whole performance review thing, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Oh my God.
it just makes stakes a little bit less.
yeah, it's like, you held that for 6 months.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, wait, I had 6 months that I could have improved, but you didn't share that with me, or you've been thinking for something for 6 months and you never said that, right? Like that's kind of hard. There have been some comments in the chat, so I want to just read them out to you guys so you can comment if you have. One person said, best manager I've ever had were the ones with high EQ, especially the mobility aspect. Abigail said, I feel like sometimes we get into the weeds, so we forget that people working with us are also humans and have lives outside of work. I think that's especially hard online because you just kind of see this face. At least in the office, you can see like, oh, you have a new haircut. Like there's different things you can notice. And then Gustavo said communication flexibility is a key on retaining people. So just sharing that with you too, if you had something to add to any of those.
It's so true. A lot of like it's online only now. Like meetings are there just to get what you need to get done. There's no impromptu personal chatting. So you don't get to know people, and you kind of, like you said, you forget. You feel like you're programmed almost to work with these people, and like that's it, not have a conversation out of it. Obviously, that's not the intent, but that's kind of how it just ends up. So for sure, reminding yourself of that fact is important.
Lola, I wanted to ask you about this. What do you think about giving managers some sort of an allotted money amount that they can use as they wish on spot bonuses every year?
Ooh.
For example, in my last company, people had an allotment of like, hey, when you see something awesome, just appreciate it. You don't have to ask for permission. This is kind of the budget, right? And I remember getting something like that. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I don't have to wait till next cycle of performance reviews or 3 years to get appreciated, right? And this is more for like bigger things. Like it was actually a bonus versus a thank you card or something like that. And I was like, this empowers the manager to do the right thing and appreciate the person when they notice something versus having to go through like hoops of bureaucracy to give someone $1,000 bonus, right? And it definitely felt good on the receiving end. So I'm curious, what do you think about that as like a tactic for helping engage people?
Yeah, I'm all for empowering leaders to have their own budget that they can use at their discretion to reward their employees, obviously for meaningful contributions, right? Not just like, oh, thanks for working this weekend. Like, here you go. It's like, but maybe what people teams can do just to make sure they're effectively used is establishing like just high level guidelines or guardrails, right? So in these situations, probably don't want to use your budget, but these are like example situations you might want to, right? Where they had huge impact to the organization and to the team, right? If it was a smaller team impact, maybe you give a smaller amount, just some like high level guardrails or guidelines. And where I've seen them work well is also if they're tied to like measurable goals or even values, right? It's like you have to align them to at least one of these company values or something like that.
Like the idea of guardrails, but not necessarily too specific that kills the fun, right? It's like, here are some best practices, and then we trust you. That's why you're a manager, right? Like, go do your thing, but still, like, don't spend the whole bonus on one person because whatever.
And I have seen where like HR teams are frustrated because it's like, oh, the head of engineering, it's like June and they spent all their budget. Now they're asking for more. They got their allocated, but that's their fault. They spent it by June, right? And so like they become frustrated, but it's like maybe those guidelines in the beginning of the year is like, hey, this is all you get. So start, maybe like every quarter you calibrate all the contributions of your team, and then that allows you to not overspend too fast during the year.
I like that concept a lot, Una. The more I think about it and reflect, I think it just, again, it gives them opportunity to do something right in the moment and not have to go through 15 levels of approvals, especially when it's like a smaller sum. You're not asking for a 10 or 50,000 or 100,000 spot bonus, like $1,000. I think anyone would be happy to receive that. It's not like a small amount, but at the same time, it's large enough that you can get the intention behind it.
At that same place, we all, as employees, we all had corporate credit cards, which sounded crazy at the beginning, but when you give people responsibility, they return back responsibility. When you give them mistrust, they return back mistrust. No one ever abused the corporate credit card, right? It was like, hey, honesty system, honesty policy. Of course, there's someone reconciling things and we'll come talk to you if there's something crazy. But everyone knew that if they wanted to share an appreciation and they thought a book that they can buy for a person that it's really meaningful to them to say thank you, they can just do that. $15 on Amazon, who cares, right? But everyone knew that like this is how, like, it's not about just saying thank you, it's about showing thank you and be reasonable, right? We're adults, we're all hired here for a reason. And it was so empowering as an individual. It's like, wow, I can just say thank you. And then people were doing it. Like people would say, I bought someone, a Star Wars costume because they really like Star Wars and that was an appreciation. Like, it doesn't have to be about money. It's just small things where peers can share with each other to show thank you, again, in a very unique way to the receiver, right? It's not just like, well, we all have to say thank you in the same way.
Yeah, that personalization is really key.
Exactly.
I'm just picturing a Star Wars costume being delivered to someone's door.
There was a woman, she was a fan and she got a whole outfit with all the accessories and everything like that. And I've never seen anyone so happy. I mean, total cost $300, right? But to her, it was the world. So like, it's not about the money. It's about the meaning.
The thoughtfulness, though, it's like that person knew that they like Star Wars and it had more meaning.
Exactly. Someone said in the chat, I forgot who's like, I'd rather take, a fun t-shirt than like $100 card any day. Right. And we're all different, right? Some people would rather take a $100 card and that's fine. Yeah. But you need to know what everyone appreciates, at least at a high level, so you can touch on that.
Another thing I want to bring up, and I think that's also important, and let's say this engage portion, is that there's a lot you can do with data. I know obviously it's a little bit scary now with AI and like things taking over, but at least on our end, like it's very easy to calculate, if someone has 4 weeks vacation, they take 2, you check in with them, be like, okay, like how's everything? Like what's going on? Like feel free to take your vacation. Don't worry about work. I imagine similar for both of you, right? Like there's data that's involved that you can use to leverage to see like the trends and see, okay, who is trending down a bad path. It depends obviously how open you are to using data, but it could be a very powerful kind of way to start spotting those trends, especially when you're a larger organization. I feel like it can be kind of tough, if you're an organization of 20, for sure, you can go one by one, case by case. But if you're an organization of like 1,000, I think you need to start looking maybe at a more macro level and try to drill down a little bit as you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trend-wise in our space is like, our platform allows companies to say, "Ooh, look at all these high performers that hasn't gotten an increase in more than a year and are below market," right? So it highlights those folks that you should pay attention to, pay fairly, of course.
Love that.
That's pretty neat. Yeah, and I think with the bigger the company, the more you have to involve different layers of the company, right? Because it's always about the unit, like the team unit, that's important. So how do you engage the manager to have that conversation and maybe feed them the data and say, hey, these 5 people in your 50-person team are green, are red, right? Or they're yellow because of these. Have a conversation. I can help you prepare for that conversation or whatever that is. But kind of sounds like it's more about influence than directly having that conversation, but influencing others to go have that conversation and encouraging them.
Love that. This is also a good segue into, let's say, the last portion of our employee journey, which is retention or retaining. Mm-hmm. So now we know you've acquired your star performers, or you found those diamonds in the rough, you've engaged with them, they're happy, but now it's been a few years and you're worried about maybe losing them. So how do we retain them? I think we also this is a good question I had as well, and we were starting to touch upon this, but is how do you make your strategy work or your policies work on a personal level? But if you're a large organization, you can't go around personalizing everything, right? You can't always be one-to-one engagement for everyone, or you can't, obviously, in Lola's case, you can't pay everyone. You don't have an infinity budget. So how do you strike a balance between what's fair at like a high level, but also maybe a bit personalized for those key players you want to retain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one would be just making sure you regularly review your employees' compensation. So have a good cadence for it, whether it's once a year or many of our customers do it twice a year. And doesn't mean you're going to give them increases twice a year. You're just making sure you're looking at who is maybe below market, who might need to give a market increase to in the middle of the year too. And also a lot of our customers that are, of course, like VC backed will give refresh grants, equity grants, right? So once a year, they'll give like a refresh stock options grant so so then obviously that's a good retention tool. They want to help the value of the stock grow. Yeah.
Lola, I'm curious, when people review compensation twice a year, do they also share with people, hey, we're reviewing compensation, maybe whether it's one-on-one or one-to-many? Does the team know that that's being reviewed behind the scenes, even if the comp doesn't change?
So a lot of times they'll share with employees like high level the timeline. Hey, we do it. We have a main cycle once a year in January, and then in the middle of the year we review it. But not everybody gets an increase. It's more focused on promotions or something like that, right? So they'll know like high level the timeline typically. Some companies, unfortunately, are like not as mature in their communication, so they don't share it. And then typically it's like maybe the less employee, lower employee size, just they haven't created that good structure yet for communication. But yeah, they usually stay high level so that doesn't commit them to you're getting twice a year or anything like that. Yeah.
It seems like it would be very trust building to know that I don't have to proactively look at my compensation and wonder what people are doing, but I know that there's people responsible for reviewing my compensation. So even if nothing changes, okay, like there's someone looking at this and sure that everything is square.
Yeah.
David, to your question on the recognition front, probably a couple things is reevaluate and change accordingly. And as your team changes, as people come and go, as you grow, what worked last year might not work again, right? So whether it's those rituals that you want to switch up and be like, people are not really having fun with this, or introducing novelty, because novelty makes you notice things. Like if it's always the same and nothing's changing, then people just become used to it and take it for granted. In HeyTaco specifically, what that means is people will sometimes adjust their tacos for a given day and then go crazy on recognition once a month or once, every few months to remind people like, hey, this is a gratitude burst, like a taco power hour, taco day, or switching up the rewards, right? Like we used to have gift cards, now we have swag. Now we don't have rewards and we're giving tacos because it's the right thing to do, but switching those things up. And then I like thinking about the person as an N of one. Like what does Una want? Not what does the category of Unas want, right? That's definitely harder as people scale. So I think with scale, it might be interesting to use the same framework as in marketing, like personas, employee personas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? There's personas, people who are fresh out of college and they probably don't have as much money saved up because they just started making money, and they might appreciate gift cards, or they might appreciate experiences like an Airbnb gift card. There's the persona of someone who has just bought their first house, however you want to divide it, right? But maybe thinking about personas. And one concept that really helps people, I think, is also the 5 languages of appreciation at work, right? That's kind of like personas of what people get appreciated by. So just thinking about, hey, how do I design my rewards tied to recognition based on those 5 languages, so I can touch on different ways that people feel appreciated. Because again, not everyone feels appreciated by money, and not everyone feels appreciated by time off or whatever, t-shirt. So just always being aware of the variety of preferences out there.
Yeah, like that personas that you can categorize into smaller number of, categories.
Exactly. And it's not easy. Coming up with marketing personas is not easy, but maybe it's the persona of people who live in this geography and this is kind of what they like to do. I don't know, right? But something that can help scale this approach and not think about 1,000 people one by one, but maybe you have 10 personas, right? That's more manageable.
Sure. I gotta say, I love that you guys have like catchphrases for all these, like Taco Power Hour. There's another one before that I can't remember now. I'm maybe just on a side note, is it something that you guys create, or do your clients come up with these names and you guys like co-opt them afterwards?
I wish we could take credit for it, but once you release in the wild, everyone comes up with their own flavor, and that's where this whole notion of rituals has come to be. People are super creative, and every team is different. So Taco Power Hour is one of our customers does for Employee Appreciation Day, where for an hour, people just go nuts on tacos. Someone is doing a Valentine's Day taco, which is on Friday, obviously. Their daily taco limit for the day is 14 for February 14th. Today, I learned of a term called taco showers. So if someone is having, it's their birthday, or someone's having an awesome year or whatever, people are like, let's shower this person with tacos, and they just get tacos from everyone on the team, right? So I definitely did not come up with it. I just kind of listened to these ideas and then share them accordingly.
That's fantastic. So I had to bring it up because it was the second time you coined a phrase. I'm like, this is so good. Should start writing these down.
Yeah, you get a taco. You get a taco.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. I also really like the notion, getting back to the topic at hand, the notion of personas, I think makes sense. When you're a large organization, it's impossible to do, one-to-one. Obviously, the closer you can get to that, the better. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why a lot of these companies, they'll take polls, they'll take employee polls, but like, what do you want to see, for recognition, or how much time off? Like, do you want this policy or this policy in place? And they get creative. I think the important thing is you find what makes sense for your organization, for the culture that you've built. I've seen some companies, not many, mind you, but some do like a pet time off, where they have a specific budget of time off allocated for like pet care, appointments, and emergencies. Obviously, that's a culture that's based around like animal care and love, and a lot of employees who probably have pets, but it works for them. And it's just, again, it's a unique identifier. People, you don't find that everywhere. So it's tough to leave that behind if they're thinking about, switching roles or switching organizations.
I would have enjoyed that pet time off when like half of a tennis ball got lodged in my dog's stomach.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
$20,000 later. Good now.
Oh, that sounds terrible. David, I'm curious, what's the most unique thing you've seen your customers do with using PTO in either of these categories: attract, engage, and retain? Because kind of like Taco Power Hours, right? Like we couldn't predict that. Like, what are some things people do with PTO that you're like, wow, I would have never come up with this idea for a company?
Honestly, I haven't seen anything too like out of the ordinary. Before this discussion, I've been like looking at the stats. I think what I was most surprised with, and it kind of makes sense, is the approval rates are like very high. I would have thought that like most things rejected because a lot of companies are very stringent. But I think I capped 85% like approval, which is like pretty good, all things considered. I think the one thing that maybe was a little bit shocking was the amount that like need intervention, like they need a manager sign off, or they need a reason to be required. I was hoping that, like, we're into 2025 at this point, that like, again, this notion of flexibility, transparency is just a given, but clearly still a long like learning path to go for a lot of these organizations. But I think that's like the next like unlocker for a lot of these companies, is just being, okay, you know what, you need time off, just take it. I don't care. It's your time off at the end of the day. I don't need to a reason. Just give me a heads up. If it doesn't conflict with anyone, then who cares?
How have you seen, David, on the flip side? I'm sure you've had some companies with the opposite problem of like, oh my gosh, there's these certain employees that like we have unlimited, but they're just taking way too many, right? And the manager's probably like, how do I have this conversation? How have you seen that play out?
So actually, that's a big driver right now, and a lot of the features we just either released or are developing, where it's kind of like blockages, which I never would have thought I've seen. Where it's like, okay, we want to be able to black out days that they can't take time off, because these are like high periods, especially in like retail, like around the holidays or maybe a summer period. Or there's maybe people who are taking like requests that are just out of line, like you said, that they're constantly requesting too much time off at once, or maybe they're asking for every Friday off during the summer, and that's not part of the policy. So we're designing features to like really limit people, which is kind of interesting in itself. I think they want something like that, or they want software, not necessarily even just vacation tracker, but just software to kind of do the work for them, like to be the bad guy. That's like, yeah, exactly. Like it's crazy. I've been like playing around with some of these features, and it's like you just get a little message that says, nope, sorry, it's against the policy. So like, whoever's in charge, whether it's your manager or HR, is completely removed from the process, and they can kind of, even though they're the ones that said it. So that's been kind of interesting. And I think I see a trend there with technology, is like taking the negatives or the burdens of the stuff and blaming it on that. At least at the end of it, you could play innocent, like, oh, maybe there's a mistake in the machine, can't take your time off, I'm so sorry.
It's the system, it's not me.
Exactly. But it's definitely fascinating to see.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it earlier, about having one-on-one conversations with people about things that might not be going well, like, oh, you're over abusing this thing or whatever, versus making a policy decision or a system decision or things like that. And sometimes it feels like, if it's one person, like just talk to them, right? But we definitely tend to put policies in place even to deal with one use case.
I had that advice when I was running like total rewards at this company, and like we would go into more and more countries. So every time we would have employees in more and more countries, they'd be like, oh, this country looks like has whatever you name it, the benefit, like tuition reimbursement. Can we have it too? And maybe talking to that one person might have, created less work for me to be like, okay, now I have to think about it. Is there going to be a big policy on that? Or
That can definitely sounds like it can complicate things a lot, especially if you're dealing multinational level.
So Sandra had a question. Says, when it comes to recognition and rewards, we often find that there's a difference between what leaders want to offer, such as after work activities, and what employees may actually prefer. How can we balance these two perspectives to ensure our recognition and rewards programs are effective and appreciated by both leaders and employees?
Great question.
Oh, that is so good, and definitely a question on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, when you mentioning like asking them and like more personalization. So you don't know how to personalize it unless you kind of ask and connect with them.
I'm a huge fan of choice, right? And in HeyTaco, for example, people vote with their tacos. So it doesn't have to be a decision between either or. It might be like, hey, leadership, let's offer both of these and let's see what people choose, right? Because the people are the customer, right? The rewards are for them, not from the CEO or the leaders. Like, it's for the people to feel appreciated. So having some options, say, let's see what people vote with. And I think another thing I would think about is it about the reward and who wants what? Or is it like, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, are we trying to get to engagement? Are we trying to get genuine recognition? Are we trying to build a culture where people just say thank you when awesome things happen? And if those three things are present, why does it matter whether people choose an after work activity or a t-shirt or a book, right? So kind of focusing on what are we trying to accomplish versus how are we going to spend our $500 on a happy hour or 10 gift cards, right? So kind of getting to like the bottom of the actual issue versus what the option is. And then the third thing, this is not an advice, Sandra, this is more just like principle that might help in influencing is HeyTaco, we always think about who is this for? Again, is this for us as builders? Is it for the administrator? Is it for the end user? And being really clear about who is this for? Are these your employee rewards for the employee, as the word says, or is it for the leadership, right? So always knowing who are we building this for? Because a lot of times what we think people should want is not what people actually want, right? So just highlighting that option to whoever you're working with. Again, not a panacea, but just some kind of words of influence to share with people. I'm curious what David, you and Ola think.
Yeah, I'm like, I could care less about getting another t-shirt, for example, right? But some people love, I don't know, their t-shirts. So.
I think you eloquently put it where it's finding out what is the point, like what are we doing this for? Is it, like you said, you feel like maybe there's like a disconnect between employees and you want them to connect IRL, so that makes more sense for sure for an in-person event? Or is it just, want to promote your brand and promote ownership of the company through like merch and swag? Really comes down to what you want. Or if you're uncertain, you just feel like you have budget to spend, then I think your idea of just taking a poll or maybe even trying to split it kind of at least pleases everyone, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to please every single person, but if you can get the vast majority of them, then that's what counts.
Or also stacking them. You can say, hey, this month we're doing an after work activity. This month we're doing gift cards, right? That's the point of changing things up, because if you always do the same thing, people are just going to get tired, regardless if it's the gift cards or regardless if it's the after work activities. Everything that's just predictable, it becomes boring eventually. So switching it up and even saying to the leadership, great, let's do this first, and then afterwards let's do that, and then we switch it up, right? It's not either or.
Yeah, I find a lot of times that like leadership brings that up is because they have like someone in their network that did something that was very successful for their employees, and they're like immediately want to do the same thing for their own, even though they don't know why they're doing it. They're just like, oh, well, that sounds cool, let's do it for us. And it's that syndrome of everyone having the ping pong table at the office. One company did it and it was a resounding success. and then everyone wants to replicate and get their own ping pong tables, thinking it'll be the exact same thing.
I was talking to one of our partners yesterday who runs a community of digital agencies, and he was giving a talk to one of their members, like the company, a digital agency based in Austin. And he said, I went into the office and it was the quietest office I've ever been in my life. And we had this lunch and learn. And he said, I even started my talk saying, this is the quietest office I've ever been to in my life. There's no music, there's nothing or whatever. And people just said, but we love it that way, right? He's like, hey, if you guys love it, that's all that matters. Like, he just assumed because he would hate it to be so quiet that everyone hated it. And the people said, no, actually, we love it that way. So sometimes we project our own assumptions and interests and wishes onto others without realizing they might just like it that way. We're not all the same. Like, that would be terrible if we were all the same. So just kind of keeping our own preferences in check and not putting them on other people.
Like, no, you're the weird one.
We all just like different things.
Low key, when we said that, I'd be like, I would be one of those people who would love the quiet office.
Quiet office, I would be the ones like, this is too quiet, right?
Yeah, I'd be at the coffee shop because I need noise in the background.
Yeah.
If you do it on purpose, it doesn't matter, right? Just choose what you like and do it on purpose and express your preferences.
I know we're running close to time here. I don't know if there's any last questions we want to address. If not, we can share best ways to keep in touch.
Yeah, you can to stay in touch and keep up with the latest compensation trends. You can follow us on LinkedIn. So the Kamsa KAMSA company LinkedIn page.
Nice. Una, for yourself?
We're HeyTaco as well. That's where you can see all the news about the product, fun things, sometimes just taco puns. Obviously, with a name like HeyTaco, can't be too serious. That would be off-brand. So you can have some entertaining content in your LinkedIn feed.
That, and I'm actually gonna give both of you guys a shout out. I do think if you guys are interested, follow just Lola and Una, their personal profiles on LinkedIn. I think a lot more engaging content there. And it's the same amount of steps as following a company. You just click follow, and yeah, they post good stuff. So highly recommend.
Back at you, David. David and Vacation Tracker. So David, thank you for moderating this conversation.
Thank you for joining me.
Bye.